Hello, everybody. Welcome to the webinar today, Simply Lean, Maximize Your Business Efficiency, presented by our SBDC CARES consultant and expert in the field, Tom Goldner. Thank you for joining us. My name is Allie Stevens with the Florida SBDC at UNF. In case you are unfamiliar with the SBDC, we are part of a statewide network, and our mission is to help your businesses start, grow, and succeed. We do this by offering training webinars like this one today, but also by providing no-cost confidential consulting, one-on-one consulting in all aspects of business management and growth, topics such as business plan review, marketing strategy, financial analysis, lean operations like today. So I want to point out that you will be able to meet with our presenter in the future, if you'd like to, at no cost, to go over any specific issues with your own business's lean operations. All of our contact info will be in the chat box on your control panel, and as well in the follow-up email that will be sent to you after the presentation this afternoon. So if you're interested in following up with us to either make a no-cost appointment or to find some more training, you will be able to do so. I would like to point out, though, that if you want to follow up with us to make an appointment with Tom, when completing the form of the link or when speaking to our admin on the phone, just remember to mention today's webinar, and that'll make the process a little bit smoother. So, quick housekeeping. If you have any questions throughout the presentation, please refer to the questions section of your control panel and type them in there, and we will address them at the end of the presentation. There is an attachment in the handout section of your control panel. Click it to download the PDF. And if you don't have time to do that, we will be happy to send it to you later, but please go ahead and grab that now so you can follow along. This session is being recorded, and the link will be sent out to everybody this afternoon in that email I mentioned, along with a survey to let us know how you thought everything went. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Dr. Phil Geist, our SBDC Area Director and Consultant in our Ocala District, to introduce our speaker and let you know a little bit more about how he can help your business. Phil?
All right, well, thank you, Allie. Tom comes to us through the CARES program that had provided some additional funding for us to bring folks on board with specific expertise. And Tom is the perfect person to present this seminar. The processes of efficiency and management are in his blood, as he's a second-generation industrial engineer. He has a manufacturing, engineering, and management background that includes 25 years with companies like Nortel and Motorola, and additionally understands the small business environment. He was a small business owner for 7 years in a mechanical fabrication and service company. In the course of this webinar, Tom will be presenting a number of techniques and tools that will help you improve your efficiency in your business. And if you're interested in finding out how to reduce costs and consequently increase profits, and want to do that in much more detail than can be presented in the short time of this webinar, as Allie had mentioned, Tom is available to come and consult with you on a no-cost basis. So hopefully some of you or all of you will take advantage of that. So I'm going to switch over to Tom.
Thank you, Phil and Allie, and welcome everyone. I feel a little bit apprehensive when somebody calls me an expert at something. I'm not sure that I feel comfortable with that term. The one thing, though, that Phil said that I think does make a difference and helps me be able to work with you and help you is the fact that I was a small business owner myself for 7 years. I learned a lot of the lean principles and tools in a corporate environment. And then I implemented a good many of those techniques in my own small business. In the process of doing that, I learned a lot of lessons, some of them the hard way by doing things wrong. But that process of implementing these lean principles in a small business environment has helped me understand the challenges and difficulties that a small business owner has in doing that. So I will hopefully be able to show this from that light and be able to work with you in a way coming from a point that I understand your position. So what we're going to do today, I'm going to attempt to answer several questions in the course of the next 40 minutes or so. I want to talk a little bit about what lean is and where it came from, to give you some background. In the process of doing that, we'll get into a lot of the tools and techniques. I will go over a good many of them. There are so many that I won't be able to delve into a lot of detail on any of them. We'll just touch on them from a surface, from an understanding standpoint. Then we'll talk about how do we actually implement lean practices in a small business environment. We will talk a little bit about that. So let's go back with a little bit of history. This chart, I know, got a lot of arrows and might look a little bit busy. In the early 20th century, so I'm talking 120 years ago, not 20 years ago, at the turn of the last century, America was coming into a growing phase. Manufacturing and operations was really growing. We were an industrialized nation, and a couple of things really were happening in that time frame that really started the evolution of a lot of the techniques that are part of lean today. One thing was that there was a consultant at the time, a gentleman named Frederick Taylor, who had his theory of scientific management. And essentially what that was is that the best way to be successful was to get the workers involved with the process. He was a founding father of things like empowerment and working teams and bringing teams together and involving them in the process. He taught that having the employees buy in and own the process would lead to much greater success than having top-down management. The other thing that was happening about that time is there was a lot of automation and tools being developed. And Henry Ford started the Ford Motor Company, started the assembly line process, which was the first actually phase sequential manufacturing and operations process that went away from a custom manufacturing to a high volume manufacturing. Well, through the course of the 20th century, America grew and developed a number of other tools. And then we fast forward to the middle of the 20th century. We go through World War II. There was a consultant at the time, Edwards Deming, who was a big proponent of building quality in instead of inspecting it in and testing it in. Many companies at the time would test or inspect products at the end of the line and weed out defects that way, but didn't do a whole lot of upstream work to control their processes and prevent defects from happening in the first place. And Deming was big on looking at and evaluating the inputs to the systems and the processes and managing quality in instead of inspecting it in. His ideas were not fully accepted by most of the mainstream American companies. And at the same time, Japan was in a rebuilding mode from World War II. Their factories were having to be rebuilt, their economy was having to be rebuilt, and they were very open to any outside help. So Edwards Deming went to Japan and spent a number of years there working with Japanese companies, developing a lot of tools aimed towards this building quality in. A lot of those tools that got their origin in the mid 20th century in Japan are part of what is included in the lean manufacturing umbrella now. The term lean manufacturing really didn't come into being till probably late 20th century. And it really represents a collection of practices, techniques, and tools that are used to improve manufacturing operations. Now, as we're in 20 years into this next century, lean is applied to a lot of operations and processes that are non-manufacturing. Those same principles that were originated in the manufacturing environment have applications outside of manufacturing in a lot of other areas. So what is lean? The short definition of lean is it is eliminating waste from operations through use of these various tools. There's a Japanese word, muda, M-U-D-A, which defines 7 different types of waste. So these 7 wastes you can see here on this slide represent the 7 wastes of muda. And all businesses have waste, some more than others. Some have more of these, 1 or 2 of these 7 wastes. Other businesses have, different of the 7 wastes that are a problem for them. But all businesses and operations have waste. In my experience in working with many of the small businesses that are involved in manufacturing, the inventory waste and the weighting waste are the most prominent. Companies, inventory is not a bad thing if it is planned and if it is intentional. There are good reasons to carry inventory, but you want to manage your inventory and not have inventory manage you. And a lot of times inventory can get out of control, grow to the point where it is moving around in a warehouse and handling and finding products and shipping, making it inefficient. The other key waste that I see a lot is waiting. A lot of reasons for waiting. You can be waiting for parts or materials. You can be waiting for direction from a supervisor or instructions. You could be waiting because a piece of equipment is down, or maybe it's being set up and changing from one product to another. Anytime we're waiting and the processes to transition a product through its completion are not being done, that waiting is a waste. So how do we implement lean? What are the steps to implementing lean? Essentially, it's a 1, 2, 3 process. Number 1, we define the waste that we're going to target for our business. Number 2, we're going to select the tools that we use to target those wastes. Number 3, we're going to develop an implementation plan, and we're going to execute that to deploy the tools that we've checked the waste that we're targeting. All sounds simple, right? So in targeting our waste, we look at our operation, we consider those 7 wastes and which are most significant in our process and operation. We also consider which can we impact the most. Different wastes, there are different tools that attack different wastes, and some of those wastes are harder than others to do something about. Could be because it's inherent to the way our business works. It could be because of the skills or capabilities of our staff or team. It could be because monetary restrictions or budget restrictions. So we look at the waste that we've got, which are having the biggest impact on us, and which can we actually control or do something about, and we select that waste that we want to target, whether it's reducing inventory or reducing wait time in one of our manufacturing areas. So step 2 then is, once we select the targeted waste we're going to focus on, we need to select the tools that we're going to use to go about attacking that waste. Now this is where I'm going to get into some detail on some of the different tools. I hope I don't lose you, and I hope you don't fall asleep. I'll try to keep this as lively as I can, but there is a lot of detail in a lot of these tools. So this slide shows 6 key tools that are part of the lean manufacturing toolbox. Now, if you ask any quote lean person, what are the lean tools, they're going to give you their definition and the tools that they feel are key parts of the lean toolbox. And everybody's got their own package of tools that they consider to be the key lean toolbox. So you'll get a different answer from 10 people, you'll get 10 different answers. But the ones I'm going to talk about here are most common to most people when they talk about lean. The 3 first ones on this chart, Six Sigma, 5S, and Kanban, I have a slide after this where I'll get to those in a little bit more detail. So I'm going to move past them for right now, and we'll talk about the next three. TPM is total productive maintenance. This is essentially taking care of your equipment and preventing it from going down. We talked about the waiting problem. One of the key problems of waiting is your equipment goes down, so your employees are waiting because something is down. Total productive maintenance program addresses equipment much the same as would take care of your car. Most everybody probably has an automobile. If you don't change the oil or check the filters or the belts or take it in for service at all, sooner or later your engine's going to fail and you're going to be without a vehicle, and you're going to be spending a lot of money to replace the engine. That same principle applies to all different types of equipment. You have to have a proactive program that does precautionary things to clean, prepare, replace, and keep your equipment running smoothly. It also includes collecting and having the appropriate spare parts on hand, so that when something does go down, when you have a breakage, you've got the part there on hand to fix it right then, and you're not waiting. There's one client that I worked with that had a situation where a belt broke on one of their pieces of equipment. They didn't have the belt on site. The belt was actually custom manufactured by the equipment manufacturer that was over in Japan, and it took over a month to get that part. So this piece of equipment was down for over a month. They couldn't use it. So this is something a total productive maintenance program would address. The next item on here is methods and motion analysis. This is typical or traditional industrial engineering. It's looking at the workstation or the work environment and designing it in a productive manner. High-use tools and materials are located close to the point of usage. Items that are not used as frequently can be located a little bit further away. It reduces the amount of reach and motion and traffic back and forth to get things, just to create a more and most efficient operation. The last item on this list is process mapping or flow analysis. This can be applied to a manufacturing process. It can be applied to material flows, information flows. It's taking and mapping out the sequence of processes or flows in an operation. A lot of times in manufacturing plants, we'll have product that will flow and then back up and move over somewhere else, and there's not a continuous process. It goes forward, it comes back, and so mapping this all out and looking at it helps us design a more efficient and more effective flow and sequence of operations physically, so the product can flow continuously forward instead of backing up. Okay, Six Sigma. Six Sigma is a tool that is very commonly linked with lean manufacturing. It is it was a tool that was developed in the late 80s and 90s in corporate America. Motorola and General Electric were two companies that are considered to be the fathers of Six Sigma. Six Sigma is, by definition, achieving quality levels of 6 standard deviations out, which equates to 3.4 defects per million opportunities. So the way it would work is you would look at the product and all the possible ways that it could fail, all the possible failure modes on that product. And once you achieved an outgoing quality level of 3.4 failures per every million opportunities, you have achieved Six Sigma. So how do you do that? Well, the process of doing that is there's a 5-step process called DMAIC: define, measure, analyze, improve, and control. And essentially what the process is this gets back to a lot of Deming's approach, is it's looking at the input to a process, understanding which input variables impact that process, and then establishing controls on those input. An example would be, let's say you're a manufacturer of a product that uses a paste to create this product, and your process involves having to mix things together, create this paste, and then you apply that paste to help complete or coat your product. So the Six Sigma approach would take a look at the input variables to that paste and try to understand which are the critical variables or characteristics of that paste that influence the quality of it downstream. Is it the thickness or viscosity of the paste? Is it the temperature that the paste is? Is it the humidity in the rooms? And by structured experimentation, a Six Sigma program will look at gradually varying each of those different variables to see how they impact the output or the quality of that paste, and arriving at what is the optimum mix of temperature, humidity, and other input variables so that we can achieve the best paste coming out of the process. And then you put controls in place to measure those input variables, humidity, temperature, things like that. And as you're monitoring those things, if the temperature starts to change or drift out of what your target levels are, there's a warning signal that goes off, and you stop the process and you go back in and you make changes so that the temperature comes back into control before it actually affects the quality of the paste going out. So this whole process takes some understanding of statistics and math, takes some training to implement to its fullest extent. There are Six Sigma green belts and black belts. You might have heard that terminology. People achieve a green belt and black belt status by going through and managing projects of different levels of complexity all the way through the DMAIC process. So that's Six Sigma in a nutshell. It is a tool that attacks rework. If you have quality problems or issues, a lot of rework, Six Sigma may be a tool that makes sense to go do. 5S, this is a tool that is a good candidate for implementing in most every small business. A 5S program, 5S is a term that originated out of Japan, like many of these lean tools did. It comes from Japanese origin. The 5S's were Japanese words. The English translation are sort, set in order, shine, standardize, and sustain. And some companies have added a sixth S, safety. 5S is much like cleaning your garage. Everybody probably at some point in time has come to the realization that their garage is just overrun. They've got a bunch of stuff in there. It's dirty, it's not organized, and they're going to commit themselves to cleaning up the garage. And so the first step you do is you go in and you pull everything out and you sort it into piles. You sort the stuff into trash, what you're just going to get rid of and throw away. And then you got another pile is the stuff that is good stuff. You have to have it, you're going to keep it, you use it frequently. And then there's a third pile that is, well, this stuff is not bad stuff. Somebody will use it, but I don't really use it. So I'm going to yard sale it or give it to Goodwill or something like that. Well, that's the sorting process of 6S or 5S. The next thing is you would take that pile of stuff from your sorting process in the garage after you've gotten rid of the trash and you've taken the stuff to Goodwill or had your yard sale. What's left, you take and organize it. You put it in a place on your shelves, or maybe you get bins and get it all structured. You might even put labels on it so that you know what's in each bin, and you create order. That's the set in order process. And then step 3 would be shine, where you're going to get your blower and your sweeper, your broom and dustpan. You're going to clean up. You might even mop the floors and wipe the dust off of everything so your garage now looks spick and span. And then you would standardize that process through other areas. You may go to your tool shed or other places. And then the fifth S of sustain is putting a process in place where you essentially audit it, audit your areas and make sure that there's ongoing compliance with the order that you've created. This is a good tool for attacking the weighting, the motion, and the transportation waste, and it's easy to implement. This next slide gives you a visual representation of it. The picture on the left, this is just a janitorial storage area. You look at that corner of all the stuff piled up in the corner. If you had to go get something out of there, if you were looking for a tool or an apparatus, you'd be searching through that. You might get cut. You might have a rat jump out at you. There's no telling what could happen. It would take you a long time to find what you're looking for, and it could be some safety problems. The picture on the right shows what the area would look like after a 5S deployment. The tools that are needed are kept, they're organized, they're set in place, they have a designated location, they're labeled. If you go to look and find something there, if it's not in its spot, it's obvious. The spot will be vacant. You don't spend a lot of time looking for something. These applications, this 5S practice has application in most every small business that I've been into. Okay, the last one on our top 6 list here is Kanban. The Kanban is it's another Japanese word. The literal translation is a card. Essentially, it is a pull system. It is creating a system of pulling work instead of pushing work. It is usually it's used to attack the inventory waste. The best way for me to describe this is, imagine there's a work area that has 4 different operations to build a product, and there are 4 people that are sitting down at their workstation doing 25% of the work. When person number one completes their first unit, they set it on a table next to them waiting for the second operator to do their process. Well, this table would be sized so that only 5 of these products could go on that table. That essentially would be a Kanban. The quantity would be 5, and the way the Kanban would work is operator number 1 would continue to work and build product until they had all 5 spaces on that table full. Once they had that table full, then there's no place to put another product, a 6th product, they stop working. It doesn't make sense to build more than the 5 until person number 2 catches up and pulls that 5th unit, opening up a spot on the table. Person number 1 stops their work. They may look to help person number 2 in what they're doing, but it doesn't make sense to overbuild. Overbuilding and creating more inventory between operations and WIP, it causes poor utilization of space. It creates safety issues. It creates inefficiency in looking for and moving and finding stuff. Now, 5 may not be the right quantity. Implementing a Kanban process is going to require understanding what the right quantity is between operations, or what is the right trigger or signal to signify for the process upstream from it to start. So these are 6 of the most common tools used within Lean. I'm going to touch briefly on several others here. Structured corrective action process is something that companies should have, whether part of Lean or part of their operation overall. This is just having a defined method of capturing corrective actions, documenting them, and making sure that your corrective actions that you are taking against fixing a problem have the desired effect. They actually fix the problem that you're trying to go after. Visible factory, anything within your operation that will create a visible signal when something's down, can save time. Red lights that go off if a piece of equipment has gone down. If an operator needs to have materials delivered from a material handler, there may be a sign that they can put up, or a light that goes off indicating somebody needs help. These types of things, creating visible indicators, creates more efficiency and eliminates a lot of waste. Risk proofing, there's a process called failure mode effects analysis. Essentially what this process is it looks at a product or a process, and it considers all the possible failure modes, the ways that that product can fail, and it looks at each of those failure modes and gives it a score of the likelihood that that failure mode will occur, the severity if that failure mode happens, how big of an impact would it have on the overall performance of the product, and then the detectability of that failure mode. If this particular failure mode happens, will we find it? Can we catch it? Or is it something that will get through our process and be undetectable? And all three of those scores are multiplied together to give a risk priority number for each failure mode. And then you take and approach the high risk priority number failure modes and take action against those, and gradually work down from the highest to the lowest risk priority number score. And that way you're working to fix the problems that have the biggest impact on you. Error proofing, this is another approach that is often considered part of lean, but poka-yoke is a technique which is essentially like implementing or creating a physical gauge. Something will physically stop a defect or a product from moving to the next step. An example might be if you're building a product that can't be over a certain height and it runs down a conveyor, well, then you put a bar that height on the conveyor. So if a product that's slightly above the desired height gets to that bar, the bar will stop it and keep it from going on to the next process. That would be a poka-yoke. 5Y is just a technique for drilling down to get to the what's the true root cause of a problem. A key example here would be, let's say you have a power outage. Normally what would happen is power goes out, you would ask, why would the power go out? And your maintenance person says, well, we blew a breaker. And a lot of times people will just say, okay, we'll go flip the breaker back on or go replace the breaker. That's not the cause that needs to be addressed. What needs to be understood is, why did that breaker go? So you ask why again. Why did the breaker go? Well, you may find out that the breaker flipped because there's a power surge coming from a particular piece of equipment. Then you ask the question again, why was there a power surge at this particular piece of equipment? And ultimately, you keep asking why until you find out that there was a wire within the control panel at that piece of equipment that had some insulation that had come off and was creating a short. So now you know what the true problem was. You can go re-insulate that wire and protect it, and you won't have a short, so you won't have a power surge, so you won't have the breaker trip, so you won't have the power go out again. If you don't go through a structured process of asking why until you get to the true root cause, you're not going to fix the right thing. Next item here, benchmarking or best in class. This is just learning from people that have already invented the wheel. Most companies, if they do something well, they like to brag about it and they're open to sharing it, especially if you're not a competitor. If you are trying to learn how to do something or become better in a certain area, and you know another company that's maybe not in your direct industry, but maybe close to you, maybe it's a warehouse management and you got a company that sells different products, but they have great warehouse processes. Ask them to come look at their processes, tour their facility, see how they're doing it. That's the simplest and best way to learn new things. The final item on here is just standardizing processes through documentation. If we don't have standard documented processes, then our processes more often than not are not repeatable. When we have new people coming in, new employees, they adapt or adopt different approaches, and the end results are different. Our product's not consistent. So we have to create a standardized process. This is essential if you're going to pursue a quality system certification like ISO 9000, but it's important even if you're not going for a quality system certification. It's important to creating consistency in your operation. Other employee best practices that sometimes aren't necessarily considered part of lean, but are just characteristic of good companies, things that allow you to be successful and be more effective and productive in your operations. I mentioned Frederick Taylor before, and the high performance work teams, empowering teams. This is important, making sure the people that are actually doing the job are involved with the decision-making processes of making changes. They know a lot of times the best way to fix a problem. So getting them involved in the process leads to a better solution sometimes, and it almost always leads to a more accepted solution. Communication is something that I've seen in need of a lot of improvement in a lot of businesses. I think everybody understands the need or want to feel like they're being heard. Too often, employees don't feel like that their ideas or their concerns or questions are heard by management. They also don't feel like they're being communicated or told how things are going or what's going on. As a business owner or a manager, it's important to set up intentional communication processes, whether they're scheduled one-on-one meetings with employees or group communication meetings, where you can share information with your team, let them know how things are going, and solicit inputs from them. A formal on-the-job training program is key. Most of the skills and the techniques that people use to complete their job are not received from an outside training class or school or something else. They're learned on the job. They're learned from a peer. It is very important to have these key skills and techniques documented, and a documented approach towards training employees, new employees. This would involve, for every task or for every skill, listing out the key skills that need to be demonstrated, who's going to teach the employee on how to do them, and then how is this employee going to demonstrate their capability once they've been through training. And then finally here, goal alignment and rewards and recognition. It is important and critical that everybody have goals. Without goals, they're not going to strive for improvement. And many times management has goals, but the employees, out on the factory floor or warehouse or whatever, they may not have defined goals. It's very important that all employees have goals, that these goals dovetail as you move through an organization, that an employee's goal supports the overall business goal, and also that there's some form of rewards and recognition that's tied to goals to incentivize employees to go achieve those goals. It doesn't have to be monetary. It could be an extra 30 minutes for lunch, or it could be a pizza day on Friday or something like that. Or again, it could be a bonus. All these things are good. And of course, if the incentives are there, it helps employees focus on achievement of the goals. Okay, so that was a lot of time talking about tools. So how do we then now select the tools to use? We go through the process of considering the waste we're going to target and which of the tools in this big toolbox of lean tools would most appropriately address that waste. We have to consider which tools are we most capable of using. We may want to fix a quality problem, but going the route of Six Sigma may not make sense because we got a small team, they're not trained in statistics or knowledgeable in math, and our organization doesn't have the bandwidth to go do Six Sigma. So we use a different tool. So you pick the tool that fits your business's capabilities and can target the waste that you're targeting, okay? So then once we select that tool, now we're on to the implementation. Implementation is where most of the lean efforts fail. Many companies will go through and they can look at their waste. They can come up with a lot of great ideas, and they can have an idea or a wish to go implement Kanbans in a certain area, but they don't follow through with a structured action plan and a process of monitoring that action plan through execution to make sure that it's done. So this is the key, and this is something that really has to be done right. The way to do this is to get the people involved that are going to be with the process and have them involved in coming up with the action plan. You brainstorm and establish the different steps that we need to take to implement. If it was going to be implementing Kanbans in a particular manufacturing area, we would brainstorm and come up with the steps, who needs to do what, so that we can ultimately implement Kanbans in this area. I have an example chart next that we'll look at. Then once we have the action plan, we have to have a system of review and governance. We'll have it may be once a week or every 2 weeks, we get together with the team and we review the action plan and we monitor the progress. That process builds accountability, and it makes sure that the people that are owning the different actions are actually doing their work, and it just doesn't fall by the wayside. Sometimes you have to change your action plan, not just sometimes, often. The plan that you start with needs to be modified. New actions come in. Certain actions don't have the effect that you wanted. So you go through the plan, do, check, act process, and then this action plan is a living document until it is completed and the lean tool is deployed. Then once we finally get the action plan completed and we have our Kanbans implemented in our manufacturing area and everything is running like we had hoped it would run, then we need to standardize that process. You document it, you create working procedures on how to use the tool and how to use the Kanban. You train all the employees on how to do it, and you put measures in place to measure its effectiveness, an audit process to periodically check in. And then you move on to the next target. What's the next area we're going to work on? What's the next waste we're going to address? What's the next tool we're going to use? And don't forget, we need to celebrate our successes. This is where the pizza party or something else rewards the team once the job is completed. So here's an example of the action plan that I mentioned for our Kanban or hypothetical Kanban. What's important for an action plan is the specific steps that need to be taken, need to be defined. This would be what's under the description column here. Who is responsible for each step? There needs to be an ownership, and people need to understand who's going to take what action. And then there needs to be some framework or measurement in place to understand when that action is done. Usually that's a target date. When is step number 1 going to be done? And this action plan would be something that's part of your system of governance and monitoring. For instance, you can see here that there are target dates for the actions: June 1, June 8, June 15. So let's say our first project review is on June 5th. Fred and Bob know that they're going to have a project review on June 5th. They know their action is due to be complete June 1. So in that project review, they're going to have to give an update that hopefully their action is complete. There's an accountability process there for Fred and Bob to have their action done. If not, they're going to have to explain in the project meeting or in the review with you as a business leader, what happened. And a lot of times there are good reasons why it wasn't met. But the point is that there's an ongoing process for review to ensure that the steps actually get taken and the plan gets completed. So that was a lot in a short period of time. I understand that I just touched on very surface level a lot of different tools and a lot of different things. By no means would a small business be using all of these tools. What my approach or what my goal would be in working with you is to look at your business get started by targeting your waste, selecting a waste that we're going to go address, work with you to pick the tool, 1 or 2 tools that make the most sense to address that waste, help you develop the action plan and go through the process of implementing that action plan for that target waste. And so as you get comfortable with the process, you can then take and follow on and do that same thing in other areas of your business, targeting different waste or maybe using different tools. But that's the approach that I would suggest. And with that, I will open it up to Allie and any questions.
Thank you, Tom. That was an awesome presentation, a lot to take in, but I think a lot of business owners can get a nugget or 2 of information out of that can be applied to their business. And again, if there's more questions or more in-depth look to take, then Tom here is available for appointments. So one question that we got in here, will one of the lean tools work if I'm in a service business where work is done on many sites, like a plumbing contractor, for example?
Absolutely. Service companies have waste just like manufacturing companies do. A plumbing contractor might, they might not have the right instructions, or the work orders are not clear. There may be a lot of reasons that they're waiting, for instance. So one waste might be, in the morning it takes too long for the crew to get out to a job site. They're waiting for a lot of different things. So you go through this process of understanding, why are we waiting? Is it because we don't have the information, the parts, the instructions, whatever? And you take the same approach with the service that you would with, with manufacturing. They use tools. They're going to use welders or pipe fitting equipment, things like that. That equipment needs to be maintained. If it breaks out in the field and they can't complete a job, then there's an issue there. So they need to have a good preventive maintenance program on all their tools and equipment. So yes, service companies are very much benefits from a lean approach.
Thank you. Another question is, what is a good process mapping tool?
What is a good process mapping tool? Like just flow charting is what I would typically use. There are more sophisticated tools, but I would just create, starting at the top, do a flow chart of the sequence of operations. There are much more sophisticated tools, but just a basic flow chart is what I would most often use.
Awesome. Thank you. One more question. If you come look at my business, do you just make recommendations about what to do, or do you help me implement the changes?
Oh, absolutely. I would. Well, that depends on how you want to work with us. I'm available to work with you through the whole process. If you want to take the implementation role and run with it yourself, by all means, you can do that. If you want me to be involved in the creation of the specific action plan and the deploying a ongoing monitoring and accountability process, I will help you and be involved in that process as well. So it really depends on what you want.
Thank you. And I don't see any more questions coming in. So I just want to take a moment to remind everybody that yes, this was recorded. You'll be sent a link to the recording this afternoon. In an email that I mentioned at the beginning, please be on the lookout for that. It will contain the survey, a link to the recording, and follow-up links or phone numbers to get in touch with us and make your no-cost appointment today with Tom if you are so interested. And so on that note, I think we'll go ahead and call it a day. Tom, Phil, also thank you guys both for being on here and for this informative webinar for the attendees. And with that, I will say have a good afternoon.
All right, and quickly
Thanks,
before,
everyone.
I just want to remind folks that there's no risk at all in having Tom come out and look at your business, and you have a lot to gain. There's no cost involved. He can come out and make recommendations, and then you can decide at that point to proceed or not.
I think what I would also say is the starting point would probably be a conference call or maybe a Zoom call where we can talk about your business and what your challenges are, and really set a goal of what we'd want to look at. There may be some things that we could do without having an on-site visit, but more often than not, it makes sense for me to come out on site and walk through the process with you. But we would start with a phone conference or a Zoom call or something just to introduce parties and kind of get the ball rolling.
Thank you guys very much. I appreciate all the info. And we'll look forward to seeing everybody at the next one. Thanks, guys. Have a good afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.